Okay, so that's a basic sort of extracting data from your model. You can do things like find areas, find volumes. Again, this will adapt to your model as you change it. One thing by default that won't happen is if you change the geometry in Rhino. So let's unhide my geometry again. I have these boxes. If you say I want to, if I'm moving these around, right, it'll still work. It'll follow along. But for now, I want to delete one of these, or I want to make a new one. It's not going to automatically update that reference in Grasshopper. So for instance, if I delete one of these, you can see now it's complaining because it can't find one of the reference geometries. One way to solve this that becomes really useful when using Grasshopper as a kind of analysis software is creating a pipeline. And the pipeline will actually feed geometry dynamically from a certain layer in Rhino into your Grasshopper definition. So in this case, I have this layer set up called inner form, which has all of my inner boxes. And I basically want Grasshopper to always reference anything that's in that layer, that's a surface, and apply this analysis to it. So what I'm going to do here is create a pipeline. In parameters, you have the geometry pipelines here. You can also double click and type in pipeline. So the pipeline will basically ask you to specify a layer, a name, and these work like filters basically. You can filter down to the data you want, and then a type. And usually what I do is anytime I'm working on something I want to pipe into Grasshopper, I'm going to create a special layer for it, and I'm going to change the name here. So you just double click on this field, you type in the name. So my name is inner form. And then you have to click on the type of geometry you want to import. So in my case, I want to import any surface that's in the inner form layer. So just double click on that surface icon. So this is points, curves, surfaces, and meshes. So I want surfaces. And now out of the output is going to come any surface that's on that layer. So I can plug that into my geometry. And now that geometry node will have a dynamic version of anything that's in that layer. So right now it's the same thing. What I can do at this point is I'm free to delete things. You can see everything's updated. So now I have 5 values instead of 6. I can also copy things. You see that analysis and now is now applied dynamically to any box, any surface that's in that layer. This is pretty cool. It's a quick way to kind of get feedback. So as I do this, you know, all my geometry is updated. I can have my total GFA here. So this will be like my total ground area. And as I design, I can keep adding any surfaces into that layer, and it's going to automatically kind of give me feedback about how much area is in that model. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do, actually before I get into dynamic form generation, is I'm going to talk about clustering. And clustering is a way to encapsulate different workflows within Grasshopper to make your own kind of tools. So what you can do is once you have a pretty good kind of tool or setup in Grasshopper that does a specific thing, you can actually wrap all of that into one node that then you can reuse again and again as your own custom tool. And this is like a major kind of point of these workshops, is the idea of creating your own tools for analysis. That you don't, if we're going to talk about environmental analysis, it's not just about, you know, using Ecotect and one of the 5 set things. That you can actually make your own custom tools that are specific to your project. And this is something that Grasshopper is really good at. So for that, I'm just going to do a simple example of calculating FAR. I'm going to make this like dumb FAR calculation node that we can reuse. So we already have our total. This isn't ground, this is actually building. So we have our total floor area already. So the only other thing we need is our site area. So this surface is going to be our site. We're going to create another geometry node, set one geometry. Now we have a reference to our site, get the area of it. So now we have, this is our site area. And you get FAR by dividing the total floor area in your building by the total site area. So Grasshopper has a lot of math tools built in. If you go to maths, in operators you have a lot of the basic math operations, and here is division. Another shortcut is if you want division, you can double click and start typing division, or you can just hit the divide operator and it'll pull up division. This works for addition, subtraction, equality, and things like that. And then if you enter a number, like divide by 4, say, it'll automatically create a division node where the second operator, this is the thing you're dividing by, is defaulted at that number, okay? So in our case, we just want a division node, and this will ask for 2 numbers, A divided by B, pretty basic. So we'll pass in our total floor area divided by our site area, and here we will output, this is our FAR. Okay, so we have an FAR of a third. So that's all well and good, but the reason I really want to show you this is this idea of custom tool making. Say this FAR calculator is really useful for us, but we don't want to every time load up this mess of nodes. I mean, this is pretty basic, but you can imagine if you're doing something more complicated and getting the floor areas, this might be a huge definition, and we just want to kind of wrap it up and package it into something that has a set number of inputs, and the output is just going to be the floor area ratio. And the way that you do this in Grasshopper is through clustering. So if you select any amount of nodes, you can basically cluster them, and then everything outside of that selection is going to become either inputs or outputs into that cluster. Okay? And the way you want to do this is when you select the nodes you want to cluster, any lines coming in are going to become an input, and any lines coming out are going to become an output. So in this case, you see out of our selection is coming out 1 line, FAR. That's what we want, right? We want one number coming out. That's our floor area ratio. In this case, we have 1 input coming in, which is the site geometry, and we have this form, our kind of floor, our building geometry is coming in 2 places. And if you cluster it just like this, you're actually going to get 2 inputs that are both connected to geometry, which isn't so nice. So one preliminary thing you can do is just to make sure that for every input, you just have 1 line coming into your model. This is pretty easy to do. We can either put this geometry node inside our selection, so we can redo it like this, or we can just create another kind of container node and just put in between. So this is just passing the geometry down, right? It's not making a difference. But in this case, when we select all these nodes, you can see we have 2 things coming in, right? And 1 thing coming out. And that's what we want. We just want this 1 node that takes some building geometry, that takes a site geometry, and outputs the FAR. So once we have our selection, we can right click or center click on the canvas. There's this box icon, which is the cluster icon. You can also get to it through edit cluster. You can see it just wraps everything up. So now we have a node that looks just like every other node in Grasshopper, but now it's our own node. It's our own little tool. And if we hover over it, it shows us a little preview of the nodes that are in there. And if we want to edit it, we can double click. You can see here, it's the same stuff we had before, but now the inputs are coming in as these input things, and the outputs are coming out here. At this point, you can always create more outputs, cluster outputs, so you can generate other things. And when you when you're done, you can go to this box icon, save and close. You see now it's created a new input. It's the same thing, right? But this is how you can edit clusters after you're done with them. This kind of idea is really powerful, you know, beyond obviously figuring out FAR. The idea that you can actually create your own process, create some tools that are useful for you, and then reuse them again and again in your design workflow. And it also saves you space. Like once you have figured something like aspect of your Grasshopper definition out, you can kind of cluster everything together, and it frees up a lot of space on your canvas, so you don't get that clutter.